Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Winging It F1 podcast. It's another race review. We've had a triple header. We're not burnt out because we're still bloody pumped to bring you this race review of the Austrian Grand Prix. I'm Freddie Coates. I enjoyed the Austrian Grand Prix, and I'm here with Adam Dickinson and Nigel Chu, who I think both also enjoyed the Austrian Grand Prix. Adam, how are you? Did you enjoy the Austrian Grand Prix?
Yeah, you kind of make it sound like a survivor group where you're just like, hello, I'm Freddie Coates and I enjoyed the Austrian Grand Prix, and everyone goes, I don't know. I found it good. I don't know whether I enjoyed it like massively. It was a race. It was good, but it wasn't it's not memorable, I don't think, really, to me, at least.
It was better than the Styrian Grand Prix. Not that it took much, but it was better than that, just for me.
I'm not going to be able to tell the difference. In about 6 months' time, I'm just getting these two races completely mixed up. They were very, I don't know, I thought they were quite...
I was going to say we might get the winners mixed up, but it's the same person, so never mind.
I mean, if you look at the protagonists across the weekends, they've been the same people. You've got Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and that's about it.
Fun fact: the top five who were the five who were eliminated in Q1 were the same five as last week.
And the top six were the same six.
Oh,
just in different order.
I backed Norris for a podium for the Styrian Grand Prix, and then Renee came up for this one.
I think we all did. But yes, let's talk about the race winner. Very good place to start. P1, Max Verstappen. Didn't really see him, did we? Kind of cruised to it. It never looked in doubt from the first laps of practice. I don't seem to recall really looking at the results in practice this weekend. I just always kind of assumed Verstappen was on top. Nigel, did you get that kind of air that it was just he had one of those unbeatable weekends?
Yeah, Nigel definitely will have looked at the results in practice and guaranteed that at the very least. Sorry,
he practices looking at the results in practice so that he can look at the results in practice all day. Is like, what are the results, and then just in time so he can do it when the practice results happen.
Well, he didn't top every practice session, did he? He didn't top the second practice session. I think it was third. But he did top every qualifying segment, Q1, Q2, Q3, led every lap of the race, fastest lap, obliterated the field, pretty much a perfect weekend. I mean, the combination of Verstappen and Red Bull is pretty much unbeatable at the moment, I'd say. And he's going to take some stopping. He's driving better than ever. It's his fourth win in Austria at the Red Bull Ring as well. So, yeah, it's just everything has gone pretty much perfectly the last two or 3 weeks. And his 32-point lead, I think I won't say deserves it, but he's definitely driven more than well enough to have that kind of lead now. So he's just looking pretty much unbeatable.
He's been a Tadej Pogacar of the F1 grid for... I know Nigel will enjoy that. It'll go right over Freddie's head.
He's a bowler.
Yeah, he's way off.
He's looking, that's how far back the pack were behind Pogacar. Anyway, he's just been in a league of his own this weekend. I think having Norris as a kind of cork in the grid bottle helps slightly. I don't think it changed the result, but I think it just kind of contributed to what you said at the start, that he just, barely saw him really. He got pulled to lead very early on, and that was that. We saw him when he pitted and under absolutely no pressure whatsoever, and that was that. It really was. It was Vettel-like. It was the kind of performances we see from Vettel in his championship winning years at Red Bull, I think, where he just get on pole, disappear off, and that would be all she wrote.
He's the youngest driver today to get pole, win, lead every lap, and fastest lap. That's as of today. He's achieved that feat. It's just brilliant performance from Max. Do we think he can be toppled in Silverstone?
That's probably something to talk about in 10 days, I'd say.
I mean, it's not going to change.
I'd say he's the favourite, even though Hamilton goes incredibly well there. I think
Mercedes are meant to be bringing upgrades, aren't they?
They are, but if you look at the margin they've got to get, yes, it's a Red Bull track perhaps, but Verstappen is in so much form and the Red Bull looks so good. Straight line speed is there as well. I think Verstappen has to be the favourite, even on a track that has done wonders for Hamilton.
Yeah, Mercedes have they've won all but one race in Silverstone since 2013, I think. I think they only lost in 2018 to Vettel.
Verstappen won last year's 70th anniversary, I guess.
Yeah. See, like you were talking about the two Austrias melding together, it's already happened to me for the Silverstones from last year. I was going to say, I completely forgot last year's steering Grand Prix. I mean, if someone told me that Carlos Sainz started third in the steering Grand Prix last year, and I completely forgot that, because that makes McLaren's record in starting positions in Austria, from Austria, Styria, Austria, is third for Lando, third for Carlos, third for Lando, second for Lando. Like, we really shouldn't really be surprised that McLaren were there as the bottleneck. I think we can move. You were talking about Lando as the bottleneck there, Adam, and they were surprised at their pace. There was a point in the race where Lando's engineer was giving him the gap on Gasly because they were basically expecting Mercedes to pass. And then Lando's just like, go away, I don't care about Gasly. I'm focusing on the 7-time world champion behind me. And I think that was the difference with Lando's attitude today to last week.
He just kind of said, okay, as if like, why are you telling me this?
I don't care.
no relevance to me whatsoever.
Yeah. I think with Lando this week, comparatively to last week, he was playing the points game last week, and I think today he was playing the podium game. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, I think he went for last week. He was managing something. I think perhaps McLaren were worried they wouldn't make it to the end, but this week we saw the best of him. Well, not the best of him. He was on the limit because he's been incredible all year. And yeah, he was. I mean, even without Hamilton's damage to his floor, Norris was right there. He was only 3 or 4 seconds behind, and I think he was doing roughly the same lap times in a car that is it as good as a Mercedes? I don't think it is. I think Norris just drove the wheels off it to keep up, quite frankly, and he just did a superb job. Only half a tenth away from stealing pole position as well, which was just incredible.
He sort of transcended the car, I'd say. What about you, Adam? What do you think? Do you think he had? Do you think it's his best weekend in F1?
Nah, it's pretty average, really. No, it's fantastic from Norris, and again, it's just kind of becoming a non-story. Norris. It's a bit like Leclerc last season. Norris has another fantastic weekend in the McLaren. Are we surprised? Probably not really. It's just the heights he's pushing, like you say, his qualifying position, getting another podium. It's like another podium. It doesn't feel like a big thing for Norris to be on the podium anymore. I'm sure it does to him, but it's not like, oh wow. It's just like, oh yeah, Norris has gotten to the podium. That's fantastic. So yeah, he's just doing fantastic things, like another Brit in McLaren a fair few years ago now, Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, Jenson Button was fantastic.
David Coulthard.
David Coulthard isn't British. He's exactly Scottish. He's
only
specifically
actively not British.
Yes.
Scottish or Monegasque. That's David Coulthard.
Like Murray when he loses at Wimbledon. So yeah, I think it's just it's fantastic from Norris. It's a superlative performance, and
very superlative.
He's just gonna be getting better and better, and that's the thing. He is getting better and better. He is still improving, and he is so far ahead of Ricciardo that it's just it feels really strange to think that. I mean, I certainly didn't. I know a lot of other people thought he'd really struggle, and Ricciardo would put him under a lot of pressure or be able to beat him. It just feels so strange to think about that now.
He's been on it all season, but for me, I think this just about edges it in terms of being his best weekend of the year. Is that something you guys agree with?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, I gave him a 9.5.
Is that your best ever rating you've ever given someone?
So far this year, yeah.
Oh, Nigel, that's such a big moment for you. That's great. How do you feel?
Well, is that the joint most or?
We don't know what he gave George Russell.
No, I've not given anyone 9.5 this year. No.
Can't wait to see when someone gets a 10.
Yeah,
they're going to have to giving you a kiss or something, aren't they?
It would have to be like a wet qualifying and wet race or something to do it. I don't know. Anyway,
you can retroactively mark the 1996 Spanish Grand Prix if you want.
I mean, I would just say it feels like it was quite a quietly good race. Like, to have a 9.5, you'd expect that to be like a big drive through the field or something like that. You know, it's. I know he had the clash with Perez, which I'm sure we'll come on to later, and he got past the Lewis Hamilton, had a battle with him earlier in the race as well. But it wasn't like, it was just kind of consistently excellent, really.
I think in a race, yeah, go on. Oh, sorry.
That was it.
Oh, I think in a race like this, you kind of, if you start quite far back, you're never going to make the podium because we had an early safety car. There wasn't too much kind of, yes, there was incidents, but we didn't have like cars dropping out of the race. There was only one retirement, wasn't there, with Ocon. So you kind of have to start up there, which is what Norris did superbly with his outstanding qualifying lap. So I think that's kind of why it paid off. But either way, to be running with the front runners when he's in the midfield car, it's just, yeah, I think that's what makes it kind of special, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's special. I think, but I think it's special still. But going back to something Adam touched on, that about, is it still special for him to get a podium? It didn't seem to be. He was disappointed. He was disappointed yesterday because he thought he could got pole, and he could have got pole. And he's disappointed today because he thinks he was unfairly penalised into third, essentially, because Bottas jumped him in the pit stops. Bottas got second. We'll talk about Bottas in a bit because he had a good weekend, I think. But Lando, without that 5-second penalty, probably would have beaten Bottas and would have been able to catch Hamilton and clear Hamilton and hold Bottas behind, because for the same reasons that Lando couldn't close on Bottas, and probably the same reason Bottas wouldn't be able to close on Lando. So I would say that, we'll talk about the penalties in a bit, but I would say that was a second place robbed.
Yeah, I think in terms of actually, I was going to counter argue that, but I'm not now.
Well, we'll talk about the penalty situation in a bit. I'm sure we can have that. But Adam, do you want to jump in?
I was just going to finish off if we are finishing off, or just carry on if we are carrying on. But he's got he's podiumed a third of the races this year, which is just, that's like mad. And if we extrapolate that across the rest of the season, which doesn't feel like
2 podiums. Oh no, he's had 3.
It doesn't feel kind of
I need to change something
beyond the realms of possibility that he will, kind of continue that strike rate or near that strike rate through the rest of the season, really. And he's got more podiums than Perez so far. I
think my favourite stat about Lando this year is that in 9 races, he's got more points than he did in 2020. He's got he's 3 points off third in the championship, and some points in today's race, obviously with Perez a few points back, and the live standings were having him moving back up into third in the standings. He's a legitimate front runner fight now, I think, is Lando. I think we were talking about the Williams being a midfield car now, based on what Russell can do. Lando, I would say, is making this McLaren a front runner car. Do you think that's a yes or a no to end on?
I don't think on all tracks.
Ricciardo holds it back.
I think on occasion.
The shortness of Austria helps, and I think it helps Russell as well, as we'll speak about. I don't see how it would take an even more impressive performance at Silverstone, I think, to make the podium. I don't really expect it. But with Austria or Styria, you can think it could happen, but with Silverstone and even Hungary, I don't think it will happen unless there's some mad circumstances. I don't think it will happen on pure pace like this weekend.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Just to, again, jump in with a random stat, it just reminded me when you talked about Norris Vettel's nearly got, he's on 30 points now, and he got 33 last year for Ferrari, but he's got the 30 points this season in 3 races. So in 3 races, he's nearly equal what he got for the whole of last year with Ferrari. So yeah, I just needed to get that in now because I knew I'll forget it later on.
That's a fantastic reason to chime in with that point. Second place, like we said, went to Valtteri Bottas. He basically trapped Lewis Hamilton all weekend on pace and got second basically out of circumstance, would we say, but he had the pace to capitalise. He was always there or thereabouts. Just that, that good Valtteri second Mercedes driver weekend, would you say? I'd say.
Did he let Lewis through on the first lap? Because I couldn't work out. It was at turn, I think it was the first lap, or it might have been after the safety car restart. It was at turn 4. No, it was after the safety car restart that Lewis tried to attack Norris and Perez, and then through that, Bottas basically got ahead of him. And then he locks up going into turn 4, but it also looked like he let Lewis through. I couldn't really figure it out. But
I think it was just Lewis had a bit of more of a slipstream traction coming out, to be honest. I think Bottas would have held it if he could, to be honest. I don't think he was actively letting someone through at a safety car restart. I think that's too much to think about at that point.
Racing.
I thought they were racing.
It just really looked like it. Like I agree. I don't see why he would let him through, but it just really looked like he got off the power, basically.
There's really a wider debate about Valtteri's racecraft, to be honest. I mean, he was getting his elbows out, but kind of sort of sat back. And it's different when you're racing your teammate, obviously, and he knows that if he's ahead of Lewis, he probably would have to get out of the way at some point anyway. I think he was there just like, what can I capitalise? And sort of thought, I'll take it safe. Maybe, I don't know if we're gonna think about anything for that. But to be honest, I think Lewis probably just got him back.
I think all being said, there, I think it was a good weekend for Bottas. To be honest, it was,
needed it.
Yeah, as you say, kept pace with Lewis, and then came through, was able to leapfrog Norris in the pits, and then hold on ahead of him, and he would have got Lewis anyway pretty quickly. Lewis let him through, which was the right call from Mercedes to do that. But
I'm going to disagree with that.
Okay, but yeah, I think he would have had Lewis anyway, and I think it was a good weekend from Bottas. What did you get in your ratings, Nigel?
4,
7?
No, like a 2. No, I think it was like an 8.
Yeah,
I'd say an 8 is a fair result for Bottas this weekend.
I think that's the highest mark I've given him
so far.
I think it's the highest mark I've given him this year, and that's because I think it's the best weekend he's had this year. Just because he matched, like you said, Hamilton in qualifying and the race, which is not something. I don't think he's done that so far this season. I think he might have been there like in qualifying maybe, but then not the race or vice versa. But he was on pure pace right with him, and it's a track he loves for whatever reason. He doesn't know either, and he's continued to show that. So yeah, he probably maximised the result with Verstappen in the lead, and results-wise, he couldn't have done too much more, I'd say.
He couldn't have done, I don't think. And I think, talking about that Mercedes call to let him pass, Nigel, I presume you're going to say it's better to have a rear gunner in the way of Norris to consolidate a double podium for Mercedes, do you think, or is that too much of a risk with 30 laps to go?
I think Mercedes made a mistake. I really do. I think with Hamilton, obviously, is the one who's going for the championship, and I think Norris would have struggled to have got past Bottas, even if they were going a bit slower. So really? I think they should have.
I think so.
Bottas should have stayed behind and at least try to fight for it, make it difficult rather than because. When as soon as Bottas went by, they gave up the podium straight away. They should have fought for it more. Doing a championship battle, you got to fight for every point, every position, and I think Mercedes threw it away with Hamilton too easily.
But the way he basically, it felt like he caught Hamilton with like a lap or two of catching up to him when he was there. If Bottas had been, it's not Latifi we're talking about, it's Lando Norris. He's a very good driver. I mean, not that Latifi isn't, but, he is one of the top drivers on the grid, and his wheel-to-wheel racing is, a big part of that. And I just think it's unrealistic to think that Bottas would have managed to keep him behind for that long without, Hamilton was just going so slowly, and for Bottas to have to keep pace with that, it just would have made him a complete sitting duck for Norris, or he would have had to speed up, and then he would have been on the back of Hamilton anyway. Norris probably would have got both of them in the same corner. I think it's just unrealistic.
Do you think it's not worth a try though for the championship points? Do you think it's not worth a try to try something rather than essentially get rid of what was 6 points in 3 laps. You think it's not a good thing to maybe try it? And the McLaren did it a few years ago, didn't they? They said to Lando to hold Ricciardo in DRS so that the Red Bull couldn't overtake. And that worked with the DRS train kind of things. And do you not maybe something like that? I think it's
completely unrealistic. Looking at how slow Hamilton was, I think it's completely unrealistic to think that they would have been able to hold Norris off, and they would have thrown away the second place for the team of the constructors for 3 points gain. If they kept Bottas behind Hamilton for the whole thing, then I guess Hamilton comes home third, and that's the podium at the expense of a very angry Bottas. So I just don't think it would have been a battle for third anyway between them. It just would have been deciding who got third, because no way Norris would have been stuck behind them for 20 laps or however long it was.
I think Nigel and I are leaning on it was worth a try. I think saying it's unrealistic, it seems a bit weird to sort of give it up. Like, why not try something? Yeah, well, yeah, like, why give up this? Why basically give up the podium and say, well, we need to get Bottas away and just let Hamilton get swallowed up?
It anyway.
But that's the thing. That's the point. Well, why did Williams turn up to a race then? If they're going to lose, they may as well just give up. Like, it's that kind of thing. You may as well try something a bit crazy, and who knows? Maybe it would work. Probably wouldn't work. I agree. It would be unrealistic for it to work. But rather than leaving your basically injured man in the field to get overtaken straight away, which is what happened, because with his damaged car then getting overtaken, why not use your number 2 driver, wingman driver, to be a rear gunner?
If he's going to get overtaken straight away because he's injured, then Bottas and Hamilton would get overtaken straight away anyway, because Hamilton's injured and Bottas has got to keep behind him. And they're not throwing away both cars. I think they're keeping hold of the second place, and they've got an obligation to try and get the best result for me. And you've got a 95% chance, I think, of Norris overtaking both of them and getting the second. And then it's that was stupid. Or you've got a 95% chance of Bottas keeping that second place. It just seems, I'm all for teams trying things, but not when it's just, such a low chance of reward and high chance of risk and losing out.
For me, you've just got to do everything you can when you're in a championship battle like this to give it a go. And what I would have done was have Bottas in Hamilton's DRS to protect Bottas from Norris, because Norris's straight line speed. Yeah, I know, Boris Johnson. Norris's straight line speed was pretty good, but because his straight line speed was good, went with the low downforce setup. Having being behind Bottas for 4 or 5 laps, if possible, would have really hurt his tyres, and then he might have lost that edge, and Norris might have not been able to get past. So I think it was definitely more than worth a try.
I don't think it'd be 4 or 5 laps. I think it would have been 1 or 2 laps.
I don't think
it would. If you look at
we saw in the midfield with Perez, Ricciardo, Leclerc, or whatever. If you're in a DRS train and the car in front has DRS, you can't overtake at all. So
yeah, Perez couldn't.
They should have done that.
You can on the other parts of the track where one of the cars is much slower because they're carrying damage. And that was what we saw.
In the corners and the high speed, you can't follow at all. I mean, look at Alonso and Russell, Alpine versus a Williams, which was going very slow. It took Alonso a good 4 or 5 laps at the end to battle his way through.
And it was out without a car with DRS in the way. I mean, Lando would have to get past Bottas, and Bottas with DRS would just be way gone anyway. I think we're going in circles with this. But yeah, it's worth a try. It's a bit crazy, but Mercedes have made a point for crazy strategies. Go away. I'm trying to do a link to something else. Stop talking.
It is. It's just completely stupid and out of touch to try it.
It's another sign for me.
It's out of touch to put your driver in 4th place.
I think Red Bull...
No, it's not. It's out of touch when your driver's going to end up in 4th place anyway to try and stop that at the detriment of the rest of the team. Sorry, Nigel.
I think Red Bull would have tried something like that. I think they would do the kind of team that would do everything, put everything on the line for Verstappen. And I don't think Mercedes are willing to do that for Hamilton. And I think it'll hurt them.
Yeah, I disagree with that as well. But as Freddie said, we are going in circles. So moving on.
Yeah, we just went in a circle again. So let's go on to the next topic. I can't do a fancy segue. So talking about, I can't think of an interesting thing to say about it to get into it. There were lots of penalties this weekend, weren't there? Some of them were cut and dry, for instance, speeding in the pit lane, which is, a slam dunk penalty, and we all agree with that. I think there are a few more sort of...
don't actually.
Nigel wants to go back.
I mouthed that, but didn't say it, and Nigel just put all in.
Go back to the past where they just floor it at 150 miles an hour through the pit lane. And
they didn't have pit lanes as such, did they? It's just kind of like an area at the side of the track. That is original F1.
You go back to just a tent. You just exist there for 5 minutes, trying to unpeel
with some hay bales around it.
Yeah.
Don't forget
the hay bales were fantastic. They were such good safety, with also the little sort of little nets they had in the 80s. You just get caught in a net. Oh, I'm in a net now. Takes us back to our conversations about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, talking about nets. But anyway, that is not a reference that anyone is going to understand, because it's the weirdest moment of our podcast history that we've ever had. But anyway, let's move on away from that blot on our copy paper. Penalties. There were a lot of penalties in this Grand Prix, weren't there? Some of them were cut and dry, like speeding in the pit lane, for instance, when Lance Stroll sped in the pit lane and got a penalty. But some of them, I think, were a bit more
50-50?
Up for debate. 50-50, iffy.
Or 33-33-33 maybe in this case.
Yes, no, and what? Why? Who? How? When?
Verstappen 3 times? I don't know.
Still would have won. How far ahead he was, yeah. He was beating himself, which Verstappen would have won. But yeah, so let's go to sort of, the biggest talking point penalty. We've already touched on it. Lando Norris's 5-second penalty for forcing a car across the road. Thank you, Adam, for touching on it just then with your hand on the camera. Lando Norris was given a 5-second penalty after the safety car restart for forcing Sergio Perez off the track. So what happened? They came through turn 4. You obviously have seen it. And Perez went around the outside. He was around the outside. Lando stuck to his line. Perez went in the gravel. Lando got a 5-second time penalty for forcing a driver off the track. What do we think this was warranting? Do we think it was warranting a 5-second penalty? Do we think it was warranting racing incident because he was on the racing line and Perez just drove into the gravel? Or do we think Lando pushed him there?
We'll say yes or no.
So maybe we'll say yes. Wrong.
We'll say yes or no all at the same time after 3, 2, 1. All right.
So if it deserved a penalty or if it doesn't deserve a penalty?
Penalty, yes or no.
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Yes.
I don't know.
We
33.
I think.
Okay. Nigel, make your case for yes.
Oh yeah.
I think last year with the Albon Hamilton incident, I said Hamilton deserved a penalty. So with consistency, and because of Fernando Alonso famously saying at the Bahrain Grand Prix, you have to always leave the space. I think F1 and other forms of racing actually they've moved away from proper racing, which is leaving a car's width when there's an overlap or the car is alongside. Right now, if a penalty wasn't given, the stewards are saying, right, driver A can push driver B off the track, and that's fine. And I don't think that's right. So I think the penalties are absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think you've convinced me. I think I was leaning towards that way, but I didn't have the balls to back it up with an argument against both of you. That's why I said I don't know. But yeah, I think just because you're on the racing line, you can't just push other drives off the track. Or I think it's not just the racing line, it's the inside line and the outside line. And Perez was close enough alongside. He, I think, going into the corner, right, had his front wheels level, and then kind of as at the point where he actually went off the track, I think his front wheel was a bit behind Norris's front wheel, but he was still pretty alongside. And yeah, so I agree with what you say, Nigel.
I think it comes to a point in particular corners where it's really hard to sort of say, give the space before it just becomes yielding. And I feel like this can be one of those corners where if you kind of have to give the space, then essentially it's just giving up. And
you could take it outside.
Norris couldn't take the outside. If he's on the inside line, and then Perez on the outside line in this situation, if Norris has to go really tight through that corner and Perez can just open it up, then it's it kind of just means
the art of racing. That's building up. Yeah, I kind of forget what the situation was before the straight, but if Perez built, that's making a move over several corners. So, again, it's if Perez was able to position himself so that he'd be on the outside going into the corner, I don't really think Norris can just cut across and force him to lift there, to me.
But it's not. I don't. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't see it from me as sort of cutting across. Like, it is that not just holding the line to the point of like, oh, well, you shouldn't have gone there because like there's gravel there. More to the kind of point of like he can do that, and Perez should be able to see. He's on the outside. He's going for the do or die move. You live by the sword, that kind of thing, and which is definitely my immediate reaction to it. And it's kind of like you look at it and think, well, there was a moment with Russell and Alonso where Russell went right out to the edge to defend from Alonso, and Alonso then backed out because it's like, okay, cool, well, that's that gap closed, and that's how you close a gap, and that's how you defend. And I kind of feel like, yeah, I think Perez was closer than Alonso was, and I see that with that kind of thing. But Perez had the opportunity to not be there, and he knows there's gravel there, and like that's the thing. It's like the same with the album kind of thing. Like, you're going to put yourself in that position. You take the risk of being able to be run out, that kind of thing.
I don't think
that's my one. Well, I'm going to argue against myself. That's my one problem with it, because if I think this should be a penalty, if you think back to, let's say, for example, Verstappen and Hamilton in Imola at the start, should that be a penalty then? Verstappen pushing or forcing Hamilton out wide, or even Hamilton in like Portugal, I think, when
take Austria, take Verstappen against Leclerc in 2019, where he just drove, basically opened up the steering, and Leclerc then had to go over the big curve, and that was deemed fine, and Verstappen won that race with that move. It's that kind of thing.
That was amazing, to be honest, at the time. I think it's just like what the kind of racing that we want to see. I think I want to see, that's a good corner for seeing side-by-side racing, it feeds into another great section of the track. So, I think for me, I think it should have been a penalty, and part of that is because I think he did force another driver off the track, kind of objectively looking at it, but also that's, as Nigel said, we want to see that racing. We want to see it where two cars can go side by side through the corner on different lines, and be able to trust each other that they can come out, and if not, trust the rules that someone will get penalised for that, because that completely scuppered Perez's race. He could have finished ahead of both Mercedes, but it's really hampered him, and then later on he did the same to Leclerc, which we'll come on to later.
I think the Perez Leclerc issue was actually definitely pushing someone off the track. That's definitely a penalty, I think, for the Perez one, because you look at where Leclerc was and the fact that he just bumped into him and pushed him way off both times, really. I'd say for that one, that's definitely penalisable. I think with this one, it's a harder one to call, but I know what you guys are saying about
I'm not being consistent.
You need to use the track for the racing and not use the edge off track for racing. I get what you're saying.
The thing is, if with me calling this a penalty, I'm not being consistent like the stewards who made the decisions. I'm not being consistent with the incidents this season, just like Verstappen, Hamilton in Imola, because I did not call for a penalty then at all. I don't think. I think we all called it hard but fair racing. And
do you think the gravel changes that?
Similar incident. Yeah, the only difference was the gravel was a bit further away there. So that's my argument against myself in a way. Is that the consistency isn't really there for the season.
I think a lot of it, I'm just looking back at the Imola incident now, but I think some of it kind of depends on where the car is. I think in this situation, it was they went in purely side by side into the corner, and I think that kind of has a effect on it, although I don't remember if that was the same case in Imola. But if you are going in purely side by side, I think you do need to, as you quoted Fernando Alonso, I think you do always need to keep the space. Whereas we take a corner at Austria for another corner. Turn one, we saw a few moves. Actually, in the start of this Lando
Checo fight, Perez went to go to make the move on Norris into turn 1, and Norris ran him out, and Perez went over the curves, I think, and came back onto the track, and they just carried on up to turn 3. And we look at that and we don't say anything of the sort because he's able to carry on. Do we? If that's literally 2 corners beforehand where arguably the same thing happens, but because there's not gravel there, do we think this kind of rule then? I mean, I'm coming around to what you guys are saying. I think I'm sort of leveling up, really, to be fair.
We're kind of both meeting in the middle here.
Yeah, it's kind of like the rules of racing can't be different for every corner, can they?
I think it's the track, though. I think it's forcing drivers off the track. If there's, like you say, that kind of if there's a tarmac runoff, it's less catastrophic, and it's still kind of, it can be part of the track in the line that you take. You can come back on and at relatively little disadvantage to you. So I know that's kind of getting away from the specific wording of the rule, but I think it does have an impact in the way it disadvantages a driver on different corners. Because it's not just the corner, it's kind of the way that corner, if you go onto the gravel, it's then kind of off camber and the corner keeps turning right, so the corner just really gets away from you. It's really hard, and I've done that on the game many times, where it's an awful place to try and go around the outside because everyone will just tip you out into the gravel. But it's like one of the worst corners that you can get onto the gravel, because it is just so, you always take such a long road to get back onto the track.
I think the main problem Formula One has, and it's the same with track limits. Every Thursday or Wednesday, they introduce what the track limits are, and they say at turn X, we'll be looking at it. Why don't they just say if you go wide at any corner, you'll be penalised? And it's the same here. At certain corners, they will be looking at it, just like turn 4. Oh right, you'll get a penalty because there's gravel. But then at turn 1, because there's runoff, if you do it, it's fine. It's just it's. The problem is it's not just inconsistency race to race, it's corner to corner.
Yeah.
The same track, the same event, just because of the different gravel or runoff or grass or whatever. That's Formula One's biggest problem. And that's why even why I'm arguing with myself, because I don't know what the answer is, and I don't think F1 or the FIA do themselves.
Yeah, I think we're all sorry, you go.
It's going into a bit of a separate issue here, which is a bit away from the penalty, I think. But it does stem. The problem comes from the fact that the racing line is basically going onto the curb, and the is it AstroTurf, or the green stuff on the outside of the curb. That is the racing line. So if that wasn't the case, and there's probably a car's width on the curb, and the Astro that Perez could have taken, is Norris had to keep completely within the track. So, and you see it across the weekend. By the end of the weekend, you can see, the black rubber marks that have been put down. And on any track, on any given track, on any given weekend, it's like half the curbs seemingly will have that on them, because that's just, you can track the racing line. And I agree. I think we just need to get away from using the outside of the track as part of it. I think, just make it a lot easier, cut the white line in for me, or just make the white line the harder part of the track. But that's it. I don't see why there needs to be this accessibility to go onto the curbs.
I mean, I don't know if the issue is racing lines going into the extremities of the rules, which is a wheel on the track and that kind of thing. I don't know if curbs are the issue. I feel like
I'm just using that as shorthand for the edge of the track, basically.
Yeah, okay. I think, it's kind of like, just, to me, it's just more like there's so much, like Nigel was saying, so much murky lack of clarity, ambiguity, that's it, about like what is a race, what is racing, is teams basically called for that leave a car width directive rule, really, and then kind of they don't stick to it, and they do stick to it, and it sort of becomes the equivalent to diving in football, with like shouting about things and that kind of thing. And it's a really, we're all meeting in the middle on kind of just that it is a penalty, and we don't want it to be there to be able to be a penalty, and that kind of thing is kind of where it is, and it's annoying.
I think my final point on this is let's imagine there was tarmac runoff at turn 4 and turn 6 where the 3 incidents happened. Would there have been a penalty? I don't think there would have been. And that's the problem. And that shouldn't be the case. Just because the the track limits are different shouldn't mean that the penalty is different.
And I think what I was bringing up was just, I think not necessarily for the forcing the driver off the track, but the track limit discussion that we've kind of morphed into is all the ambiguity comes from the fact that now parts that aren't on the track are the quickest line through the corner. And that's kind of the battle that the F1 drivers have
that's always been the case.
Stewards. But I think just cut that out. I think, honestly, I mean, I know it sounds simple, but it just really feels like it would be a lot more simple if you just make the track and just say, right, you've got to stay in between here, and if you go off, then that's that, and you'll get, time deleted or you get penalties, whatever. I just don't think there needs to be this kind of corner to corner changing. As Nigel said, it changes from corner to corner. I think there's a really easy way to cut that out.
There is a fear in the FIA. I've written about this. I think we've spoken about this, about sort of PR as the FIA and as the race steward. And I think they're so happy to do it for Formula 3 this weekend. Up an hour before the second race, they were giving penalties and changing the grid for the second reverse grid and whatnot. I think 11 drivers were penalised from one race, and it was all post-race stuff. They're not scared to do it for drivers who aren't in the spotlight. So why are they scared to do it? Because when they have issued penalties, be it for engines, be it for anything, I remember Monza 2017 qualifying, someone's got like a 30-place grid penalty because of an engine change and started higher up because of other people's engine changes and stuff like that. And it just becomes complex and bonkers. And we don't like that, but that's just the way it has to be. And rules should be followed and rules should be stuck to, particularly when they're basically defining everything about the race. And that then makes it a worse storm, surely, than being correct to what you've got written down in front of you. And when we have turn 10 on the Rebel Ring being a corner, you can go up to the edge of the red and white curbs, but then turn 9 being one you can go up to the white line or whatever. You can't go up to the edge of the red and white curbs and that kind of thing. Corner to corner, it's bonkers and bizarre. And like, if you want to make it that much of an issue, then just get your tinfoil hat off and think like a normal person. And I mean, after sort of articles that are sort of opinion articles I seem to write at the moment are rants about stewarding, rants about the FIA. And I think half the conversations we have are criticisms of the way Formula One is being run from a rule-making perspective. And they know what they're doing. And I feel like there's just a complete lack of understanding of what they want to do. And every now and again, they'll say, right, we're going to have a clean slate. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to say, right, this is racing. This isn't racing. It always comes after something like this race. It happens every 3 or 4 years. And it's just
even more than that. I think it happens like every 5, 6 months, like 3 times a year.
6 races.
Yeah. And it's like after a penalty for something, people then get upset about it, and fair enough. And there isn't possibility to have a consistency in Formula One. Every corner is different, that kind of thing. You can't say this happened at this track, so this is going to happen at this track. But there is when there's a white line around the track. And if we stick to that, why don't we just stick to that? And
I think it's all right in one sense because their drive safety and We Racers Wrong campaigns went so blindingly brilliantly from a PR angle that they've got a lot of credit in the bank. But I think the kind of primary examples to me that stick out from that are the 2019 season, the backlash that they got from the Canada race about interfering with the result. The highlights video from that still has more dislikes than likes, and it's about 40,000, I think. And I think
like our last
that
video
stumped them. And then I think it's nearly evened up now, though. But then the 2019 Italian Grand Prix, I think it's farcical that Leclerc didn't get a penalty.
Thank God we weren't doing a podcast that season.
But I think that was kind of seemed to be a reaction that they didn't want to kind of stir the pot anymore. And I think that's just been on their mind since Canada, to be honest, about it. I know there's incidents before, but I think that it just seems to have come up a lot more now that they don't want to start poke that pot of bees or whatever the F1 Twitter is.
In the off season, we should do arguments or episodes on like previous races or previous incidents and like
asking for a fight.
Do arguments. It doesn't even need to be about one.
Your hair's funny. That kind of thing.
Thanks.
God, there's inconsistency all over the place. I mean, who knows what's going on with Charles Leclerc never being penalised for anything ever. He seems to get away with.
Yes.
I mean, you can punch Michael Massey's wife and get given a cake.
Sleep with her.
That's probably worth it for him. I've never met Michael Massey's wife. I don't even know if he has a wife. It's a fun rabbit hole we're going down.
This has gone so far away from the Austrian Grand Prix review.
It's very late.
Great. It's a great discussion about track limits and forcing people off the track and everything, and it's fantastic. But it's just like
I compiled every penalty from the entire weekend today, and into one document, and it's just like, oh my goodness. Come on, guys.
How many circles of hell are there meant to be? Is it 9? So you got for track limits discussions, and then going down to punching Michael Massey's wife and provoking the Leclerc fandom angry nest. So I did. Should we carry on talking about Austria?
That's the Ricciardo fandom you shouldn't poke. Let's carry on talking about Austria and
or the Albon one.
The Albon fandom, who are they?
They disliked our video.
Trust me, there's a lot.
So I think one of the biggest weird inconsistencies and penalties that we're not really able to discuss so much because there's a lot of hearsay to a lot of this, but it's the incident which happened with Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen at the end of the race. I think we can all agree that it seems to be a bit of a brain fade from Kimi there.
Second time this season after he made contact with Giovinazzi in Portugal. Second time he's done something weirdly bizarre.
Bookended. Stupid. That was lap 1. This was lap 70, whatever it was. Yeah. So 71. One at the start of the race, one at the end of the race.
70 for him, I guess.
Yeah, he was lapped. Then he got a 20-second time penalty to Kimi Räikkönen. Fair enough. But what came afterwards was drivers having to slow for double wave yellows. And 2 drivers got penalties, 2 drivers who weren't in the points. Nikita Mazepin and Nicholas Latifi both got 30-second time penalties. No one else got penalised. But, it seems to the impressions that seem to be coming from people who've studied this on F1 TV and whatnot is that it all seems a bit random that, he lifted here but didn't lift here, and the other one lifted at a completely random place but didn't lift here, and that kind of thing. It's like at various points there was always drivers going flat out, but they weren't penalised. And it just... I don't know. To me, it sniffs a bit of the PR thing we're talking about as well, that it's, the race finished 3 or 4 hours ago and we don't want to change all the fancy graphics our bosses have made in the social media around the corner and that kind of thing. And it's just a bit like...
Do you think the social media team is the boss of the stewards? Feels like
naturally. Why would PR and communications and media are the top dogs, aren't we?
I don't think that is the case, Freddie, because if you look at... There has been post-race changes this year. Raikkonen in Imola, wasn't it? He dropped out of the points because of time.
Yeah, but who cares?
Something. That was like 3 or 4 out.
Yeah, that's one. There's one driver, not 6. Is the thing I'm saying with that.
Yeah, but they do it. I think I don't mind the PR thing. It's not like, Ford have got the opposite problem, haven't they? They do it like too much, I guess. But
but then I mean, not necessarily not PR in that like I'm just using that as a phrase, but more just like there seems to be a thought of like, oh, this will look bad.
How will this play?
Yeah.
I just think it's always been the case that they take 3 or 4 hours. They've never done it quickly.
Quick on Perez's 2 penalties.
No, it's already set.
Very quick.
If you put someone in the gravel, then you've got a 5 second to that. We already had the conversation.
Speaking of which,
earlier on.
I'd rather see that. I'd rather see them make quick fire.
But surely, I don't know. To me, double wave yellows is cut and dry, and we always have this discussion. We always hear it. Double wave yellows is be prepared to stop, not lift for a bit and then go flat for the rest of it. It's a safety thing. And Adam and I went to a karting track a few weeks ago, and they had flashing yellows, and people were going at full speed, and nothing happened. It's like you get that kind of thing is unsafe and scary. There could be marshals on track. There's dust everywhere. There's dust everywhere. It takes so long, because what? Because they were actually going really slowly.
Drivers, that's why. And who knows what they're speaking about in that room and what the drivers are.
Oh, but I had to go really fast. What?
So that's why.
Go slowly if it's double wave yellows.
It's a hard lot of drivers. So that's
I don't care if it's 4 hours late. I just think it's the wrong decision.
I would
if
just
it's 4
like
hours
to
late,
say,
do it 4 hours late. I don't care about that. That's not the point for me.
Okay, right, okay.
The point for me is if you're going to take a long time, that's fine, but don't. I don't know. Just don't be worried about it having taken a long time to then just think, oh, let's just leave it now.
I don't think they are. I think they're doing what they think is right.
I think I'd agree. I would just like to say quickly, as this spirals more out of control, I was really gutted for Leclerc on particularly the second Perez incident, because it was a fantastic overtake, or it would have been if he made it stick, which I think he would have. It would have been one of the overtakes of the season, basically hanging it in all the way around the third sector. Is it third or second, or kind of a mixture of two, of the track? I think that would be exceptional. And, again, it kind of really damaged his race as well, because he came home 8th in the end, where he could have probably been on for a top 5, maybe top 6, but
probably 5th. Yeah. Well, probably. He would have. Sainz got 5th. He would have probably been 6th, because Perez wouldn't have got the penalty for the incident anyway, so that wouldn't have got in the way. So that actually probably is what gave Ferrari the 5th place in the end. It swings and roundabouts, but yeah, you're right. Leclerc could have been 6th probably rather than 8th. But let's move on from me basically being angry at the Formula One stewards for running an unsafe shot.
I'll wait till you're a Formula One steward, Freddie, in 10 years.
10 years? When I'm in my 30s, I'm going to be early 30s. I'll be a Formula One steward, definitely.
Well, early 50s, let's not.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Classic.
Nice.
Yeah, let's move on to some better things then. Actually talk about some drivers who have driven pretty well. Carlos Sainz, we mentioned there, 5th place, started in 10th and started on the hard tyres and did a late alternative strategy and basically came past everyone like Ferrari did last week and got 5th place. I think that was probably one of the drives of the race.
Yeah.
Yep, nice overtake on Ricciardo.
And he was only one of 2 drivers. Oh, sorry.
I was literally just saying nice overtake on Ricciardo. He wasn't.
It took you ages to realise he had said it.
Yes.
I think there's a massive delay. Anyway, I'll carry on speaking. I think he was only one of 2 drivers to have tried that hard to medium strategy, and he nailed it basically. And I think he was the better Ferrari driver for most of the weekend as well. So I think Sainz has really come on a lot, and I think it was a fantastic event, and he managed his tyres well, made the overtake stick. So just a really, really good drive.
Yeah. Nothing really to add to it. It's just quietly doing a really good job for Ferrari. Daniel Ricciardo made the most of being good at racecraft, because that's where he's at his best. Got himself up a few positions at the race start and up a few positions at the safety car restart, and held it there. And to be fair, defended nicely, but was also in the points on pace. So yay, good Daniel, hooray! Not in the shadow of Lando, but still better.
I mean, if this is good, then it's not good enough.
I think I see where Nigel's coming from. It feels like this would be good if it was like the first few races of the season. It was like, we're going to build off this. To me, anyway, I think that I kind of feel a lot better if he's been in the car, say at Bahrain or the second or third races. He's been in the car for a few races and he's got to this position. Great to kick on. I think it was a good drive. to be honest. But yeah, it's kind of like Nigel says. If you look at what Norris is doing in the car, he still needs to be doing better.
He doesn't have the pace. I mean, to qualify 13th when your teammate's on the front row is as bad as it gets, quite frankly, for a driver like him.
Well, it's not as bad.
The race
could qualify 14th, for example.
Yeah, I mean, he probably did that last week, didn't he? No, but
wasn't he 15th last week? I actually think he was, but I'll double check.
He was 13th.
I think on general race pace, he's still He's nowhere near Norris, unfortunately, and I think he was only there because McLaren had probably the third best car, and if he's in the third best car, he should be in the top 6, not 7th.
You're right, really. Yeah, no, I think
because he's been so bad, this result looks good, and people go, "Oh, right, he's back." But he's not. This is no better than what he's been doing. He's just got a better car this weekend that's allowed Norris to get on the podium, and it should allow Ricciardo to be further up too. That's all it is.
He's 40 seconds off Norris at the end of the race, and that sort of equates to what it was in qualifying, 6 or 7 tenths difference, doesn't it? One driver who also was 10 places behind his teammate in qualifying was Nicholas Latifi, and we're going to use that as a segue to now talk about George Russell. George Russell qualified in Q3, guys. Can I get a very late cheer to wake tied me up?
No, but I would just like to talk about Nicholas Latifi being 11th at some point in the race. I thought he'd get vertigo. I was like, what is Latifi? What's he doing there? He's like,
I can't remember.
Was that because everyone else pitted and he hadn't made his pit
stop? Yeah, completely. But still, it's like, I can't remember who he was battling. It might have been like Alonso or something. I was like, what is going on here? Latifi.
Alonso had a time of it. He was everywhere, wasn't he?
No. He was in Austria. He was in a very specific part of Austria.
Yeah. Latifi got 11th in his very first Formula One race.
Yeah, by default.
In Austria last year. Yes, by default. He was the last finisher, but he was 11th. But yes, George Russell, Q3. Woo!
No.
Come on, guys. Talk about things. It's a podcast.
Yeah, we're not going to cheer, though. It's not North Korea.
Yeah, but it's a way of saying, talk about George Russell.
It's nice. And now I decree.
Come on, we've got to get on with this. I want to go to bed.
He was cheering, be happy that George Russell qualified in the Q3.
Okay,
go
fine.
now.
Be upset, Nigel. Talk about George Russell, please. Adam forfeited the right.
Yeah, again, it's not North Korea.
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah, it was great. It was really good for George Russell. Again, he's cursed because he didn't finish in the points. But apart from that, nice. It was actually his first lap reminded me a bit of, I think it was Bottas at Monza last year. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Where he was just like getting over. Yeah, it was like every single corner he'd be overtaken by someone else. And it was kind of the same here, really, on his first lap, which was a bit of a shame for the first 4 corners anyway. But he recovered well. He placed it in 11th at the end of the race. So I think, again, it's another... This is just his destiny now. It's for the remainder of his stay at Williams. He is to have great qualifying and race well, but by some circumstance not finish in the points. That's the way it's going to be for the next 16 races or however many we've got left.
An outstanding effort in qualifying on the medium tyres as well to make it even more extraordinary. And even in Q3, he was 9th, then moved up to 8th because of the penalties. And then in the race, I think it was a shame his first lap because I think he was caught out. I think Ricciardo went wide and overtook a couple of cars, got away with it. And Russell was like caught up, he was caught up in that and was in the wrong position. So
what he was saying,
his fault perhaps with racecraft, but I think without that, had he held position or even lost only one place, it would have given him a much better chance of scoring points. I think.
He was spooked by Yuki Tsunoda locking up and avoiding crashing into Pierre Gasly and all the drivers ahead, which is all Yuki could really do. But that meant George then had to sort of box in behind him and then got boxed off on the exit of the corner, which then consequently meant he was stuck on the middle, on the inside line for turn 3, which is not where you want to be because then you've got no traction coming out from the cars who got the wider line, which just meant that he was always in the wrong place for the whole first lap, basically, which didn't really help him, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, his pace was always really, really good, and the mediums helped him get up into the points playing positions because his pace allowed him to start the race in a better strategy than the AlphaTauris and Aston Martins, who were really his main fight, and that's why he's finished ahead of Yuki Tsunoda and Lance Stroll, and he would have been ahead of Vettel. Vettel, I think, was nearly passing him, but obviously then had his incident with Raikkonen. But that's the thing, the strategy put him ahead of those three cars, and if he just didn't get taken by the Ferraris and Ricciardo at the start, he probably could have been in decent points because the strategy earned that. Do you not think?
It just would have made some more painful mess up further up in the race that would have cost him points. He's not getting them. Points. He's not getting them. It's just he would have no. But I think like if he'd held position there would have just been something come wrong later in the race, and that would have been that, or like Raikkonen would have taken him out, or something. I don't know. Latifi maybe, who knows? But it's another George Russell weekend.
If Latifi got close enough to take him out, that would have been fair enough for Latifi, to be honest.
Maybe when he's
he's up into 11th. I told you.
No, his fight with Alonso,
straight back down again.
His fight with Alonso was brilliant at the end of the race, where he was defending, and that was like a proper, really good scrap. That's the kind of racing I want to see. Yeah, I think it was the battle of the race as well.
Yeah, I think it probably was battle of the race, actually. I mean, maybe if Mercedes had left Bottas behind Lewis Hamilton, that could have been the battle of the race, but we don't need to talk about that.
If Adam was the strategist, we'll definitely know.
He would have been overtaken in one corner. Wow, what a battle. I think Leclerc's battle with Perez, if it hadn't been for the two, or again, particularly the second one, I think that would have been a nice battle, but that only went on over, or it would have only gone on one lap, and then Leclerc overtook him. I think I agree. It was really desperate as well, especially from Russell, because you could see he knew how much it would have meant to him, and that I think that added in just makes it even more special.
After the race, Alonso said he felt bad for George, and when he came up alongside him, behind him, he was like, when he found out he was in P10. He said he was upset that it was George. He didn't want it to be. He wanted to get the points, but he didn't want to have to overtake George to get the points.
I don't buy that.
I don't buy that at all. If he cared that much, he wouldn't have overtaken him. It would have been the real.
Obviously, he doesn't. Obviously, he wants George to do well. Is what he's saying. But he's like, well, I don't want to do as well as me. And I think that's a racing driver, isn't it? It's like a racing. You respect them, but you beat them because you can. And Alonso. It's just, he just says everything. I mean, yesterday was classic Alonso. He was just like in qualifying. It was my best ever performance of all time in a Formula One car, and it was ruined because I had to get blocked. And like a classic Fernando Alonso. I'm really enjoying having him
he
back
would have been on pole position if it weren't for that.
Oh yeah, I know. It's such a shame. I can't believe Alonso didn't win this race because of a few slow drivers ahead of him. But yeah, there's been a lot of good storylines in this weekend. It seems to have sort of mirrored the Styrian Grand Prix. When you think about it, you've got George Russell doing very well, Lando Norris doing very well last week, and the same this week, and Daniel Ricciardo doing badly. Ocon being nowhere in qualifying, and then obviously out in the start of the race, but probably would have been nowhere. That kind of thing. All the sort of storylines that are in there. Arguably, it's because it's at the same racetrack, but we'll never know.
And most importantly, though, England winning, because it is coming home. None of this matters. Honestly, after the Ukraine game, I couldn't really have cared less about the Grand Prix, to be honest. Like, it's coming home, and I'm going to be here for it. So I just want to
coming home. It's coming home. The next Formula One is coming home because the next Grand Prix is the British Grand Prix. Home of motorsport in the UK. I'm very much looking forward to it. We're going to do probably a couple of podcasts beforehand where we discuss Silverstone. I really like Silverstone. I'm very happy that we're going to Silverstone again. And yeah, I think anyone got a final word in Austria? I think, Adam, you wanted to say a word on Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah, before his pit stop mess ups, then he was doing really well. And both of them got into Q3, and he had a decent race at the start. And I can't remember who he was battling with, but he was giving it some, and then it just kind of went downhill from there in a very Yuki Tsunoda kind of way. but he's getting better. I do really. I'm not just saying this. I do think he's improving from where he was a few races ago. I think he's had a stronger run of races, and hopefully that can continue because we want to see him do well.
Yeah, probably. Pace-wise, he's definitely improved because he was at, I think after 5 or 6 races, he was a good half a second on average slower. That's more like 1 or 2 tenths now, I think.
Yeah.
So
it was a tenth off
he's definitely right there. And also, the 2-stop strategy used by Aston Martin and AlphaTauri did not work at all. Wasn't really sure, especially AlphaTauri, what they were thinking, because Gasly probably had the pace to go through on the mediums, I think.
Well, looking at Tsunoda's pace, he did too.
Yeah, probably. So, a strategic error from both of those teams.
Yeah, Yuki, I think, he just threw it away with some very silly penalties of crossing the wrong line on pit lane entry or whatever he did. And, he raced here in F2 last year. He raced twice here in F2 last year. He raced here in Formula 1 last week and didn't make those mistakes. And it just kind of think, oh, Yuki, you did it twice, mate. Come on. That's a really not great thing to do. But other than that, positive. And that's good.
Yeah.
Other than the 10 seconds accumulated penalties, positive.
Still better than Ricciardo.
Still better than Ricciardo, not in terms of points, but...
than Albon?
Yeah, Albon scored nothing today, mate. Albon didn't even finish the race. I don't even know if there was...
The ghost of his penalties had a big impact in the race, I think, or specific penalty last season. I do genuinely think it had a big impact on the race. And so...
he might have, yeah.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. Who knows? But anyway, this has been a very timely podcast because it is 20 to 12. And it's timely because I've gone insane. I think you've probably noticed that this episode.
Only just insane. Beforehand, I was nearly insane. After 40 years, only.
After 40 year, 21 of those I've been alive. Don't know what's happening in the other ones.
My mum says that as well. Wow. Although, again, 55 years of hurt now coming to an end. It's coming home.
Let's not get complacent, please. I mean, I know I said something before in the thing that might have, but no one knows.
He means our group chat where we discussed.
I didn't say
starting a podcast.
He's never talked in that. He didn't say anything. It's just me and Freddie, and then he just reacts.
Come on.
He just reacts. We've got to figure out. We've got to decode Nigel's emoji reactions to all our messages.
I still don't know why you just called it the thing. Like, you're keeping it away from people. Like, you can't know I said this in the group chat, but you aren't it. It's like, anyway. We'll inform you, dear listener, of more Nigel Chu chat mess ups over on our Twitter page. Every now and again, you'll get a good little screenshot of when he said something incredibly weird. Out of context, Nigel was actually considered as a name for this podcast. So go and follow us on Twitter at WingingItF1. I'm at FredCoates1999. Adam's at AdamDickinson01. Nigel is at Nigel C. Journo. You can go and see links to all our work that we post. You can go and see all of our mad tweets. You can see tweets about any sport you like from Nigel and Adam. You can probably only really see tweets about motorsport from me. I might then try and say something about football and actually impress people by saying something. But who knows? Please go and support us. We're needy. Thanks very much for sticking with us for this. Nigel, stop mouthing at the fans. They don't want to see what you're saying. Thank you for sticking with us for this Austrian Grand Prix review podcast. It's been a marathon, not a sprint. So see you at the sprint races for Silverstone. Have a good one, everyone.
Oh, forgot about that.